Welcome everyone. My name's Pete. I'm a developer advocate on the Chrome team at Google. I've been working on the web for more years than I care to count. I was working on Project Fugu before this, which is all the latest, newest APIs that really only work in Chrome, but they're super cool because they give you access to cool device hardware and all that kind of stuff. And that's fun, but it works in Chrome only. And yeah, our users don't just use Chrome, right? Like if we're building real websites today, we need to be building stuff that works across all browsers. So I'm going to be talking about a new project that we're working on called Baseline. And when I say we're working on it, I don't just mean Google. This is a project that's being worked on by all of the major browser vendors and is intended as something to make our lives as web developers a lot easier. So, quick show of hands, is CSS Grid safe to use in your projects today? Put your hand up if you think yes. All right, so a few hands. Put your hand up if you have no clue. Yeah. Right, like actually keeping track of when features are available and when we can start to use them and that kind of thing is actually kind of hard. Now, there are a couple of great tools to go look this up, right? We could go to, don't push that button, push this button. We can go to Can I Use and be like, okay, great, it's available in Chrome 131 or 1, but who knows what version of Chrome we're on? I just got back from vacation on Monday, and I can't tell you, I had to go look it up just to make sure I knew. I used to shoot the new in Chrome videos, and I don't know. So keeping track of browser versions, especially with these super fast release cycles that are happening now, can be really a pain in the ass. You might go check something like MDN. Go scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you can get the browser compat tables, and you're like, okay, great. Grid, actually you can use it. All those green numbers is a good sign. Shipped in Chrome 57, so we're on 130. That's a good while ago. But like, who knows? Like, keeping track of all these numbers is a pain in the butt. And it can be actually error prone. So as a specific example of that, if you tried to use gap 10%, it said it's supported. It was supported in Grid, but not in Flexbox. Try not to swear on stage. I will do my best not to. Please excuse me if I do. But that was a pain in the butt, right? You go look something up and you're like, oh, I can use this. And then you try and use it and you're like, I can't use it. Fine. Screw you guys. I'm going home. That doesn't work when we're trying to pay bills and that kind of thing. There's been a ton of stuff that shipped over the last 2 years. And it's kind of an awesome time to be a web developer. Like the stuff that we can do today on the web compared to 5 years ago or 10 years ago is amazing. We can build almost everything that mobile or desktop applications developers can build. We can build it on the web, right at once-ish, and it runs mostly everywhere. The core idea that we want to talk about is, hey, this really does work across all browsers. So these are just some of the things that have shipped in the last 2 years. There's everything from the HTML search element to array at, the off-screen canvas API, CSS masks, built-in lazy loading, user valid pseudo classes for forms, which is really amazing. If you haven't heard about that one yet, that's one of those ones where I just go squee. And there's so much more. But I'm the Google guy, right? And you might be thinking, well, all of these things are Chrome only. Well, that's not the case. All of these things here on this list work across all browsers and have worked across all browsers since 2022 to 2024. So everything I'm going to continue to talk about today works in all browsers. Now, not every, so yeah, a big part of this is interoperability. And interoperability is what makes it possible, right? Like if you think about all the browsers that we've got, it's hard. It doesn't happen by itself. It's not one of those things where, oh, yay, it all just works. You write some code and you ask a friend to write some code, you're going to write slightly different. One of you might use a for loop, one of you might use a while loop. So there's going to be slight differences in the way things work. interoperability is making sure that they do work. So if you think about implementing your code base, you've probably got one code base. Browsers, we've got 3 code bases, at least, right? So you've got the code base for Chrome, you've got the code base for Firefox, you've got the code base for Safari. Oh, and you've got to make sure that those all work on desktop, on mobile, on tablet. So it becomes this kind of big matrix of making all this stuff work. So it becomes a bit of a fun project. And because of this complexity, this is something that all of the browser vendors have been working on over the last little while, is something called the Interoperability Project. If you go to wpt.fyi/interop, you'll learn more about it. But this group sits down every year and takes input from you, web developers, from companies who we work with and all that kind of thing, to figure out what are the top features that you want implemented across all the browsers, and we work to figure out how we can get those working, how we can get that stuff into a good place. So in 2024, these were the areas that we put most of our focus on. Accessibility, CSS nesting, which is kind of cool, popovers, relative color syntax, scroll bar, text area wrap balance. That one is kind of magic. Little things make me happy some days, and that might be one of them. So there's a lot of cool stuff that happens in this particular space. And if you want to follow along, you can see it on the Interop dashboard. It's on wpt.fyi/interop. I pulled these numbers yesterday, so they're kind of fresh, fairly fresh. And progress is tracked based on the web platform test. So in order to, when a browser vendor ships a feature, you also have to supply a set of tests to be like, okay, these are the tests that we can use. So that way, if another browser vendor, or when another browser vendor ships their version, they use the same tests. We all are like, yep, everything works, it's interoperable. So you can see these numbers are actually looking pretty good. And in fact, we've made great progress. That 83 interop number at the beginning of 2024 was at 46%. So, all right, we're getting up there. And in fact, these are the stable browsers, right? So your day-to-day stable. If you look at the nightly browsers, so Chrome Canary, Firefox Technology Preview, those numbers are looking even better. So hopefully within the next couple months, whenever the next releases of all the browsers come out, we'll see all of those numbers hit close to 100, and we'll have a good interop experience. And this project has gone on to make a whole bunch of stuff more interoperable. If we look at the list of all the things that were in 2023 and 2024, many of these features were part of the interop project. So that's a really good experience to be able to say, hey, yeah, we've seen this make a difference. The 2025 interop project is already underway, so it's too late to get anything in. But this sort of in the summer of 2025, if there are features where you're like, I want this to work, it doesn't work quite right, go to the interop project, make sure that you get your requests filed in there and have a good reason in your description as to why you think this is important, and we'll start looking at those and make the announcement for 2025 probably in early January. But there's so much to keep track of, right? Like, there's a ton of features that are landing. So how do we keep up with all of the new stuff? And how quickly can we start to use new features once they've shipped? In the past, it used to be, you go to Can I Use, you go to MDN, you might have to go talk to friends, you might hear about something here at a conference. But it's time consuming and everybody has to do it on their own, and there's so many places to look at. And it's not a new problem. So this is something that we've been thinking about on the Chrome team for a little while, and it's been made worse by the rapid release cycle. Chrome used to ship on a 6-week release cycle. We're down to 4 weeks. There's a new version of Chrome every 4 weeks. There's a new version of Firefox every 4 weeks. There's a new version of Edge every 4 weeks. Things are moving fast, right? So the web platform doesn't really have version numbers. It makes things a little bit harder for us to deal with. And when we've had conversations with web developers, one of the big things that we hear is that 25% of developers say they have a hard time staying up to date with what's going on. So even with these rapid release cycles, it just sucks. So over the past couple of years, we've been working on a project called Baseline. And we want to try and make it easier for you, for us as developers, to be able to know what's safe to use, what can I start playing with, and in some ways kind of like versioning the web, right? Because with all the different version numbers for the browsers and all that kind of stuff, it's too hard. So Baseline is the project that is doing this. Now, Baseline isn't a Google thing. The definition of Baseline is owned by a W3C community group, the Web Developer Experience Community Group. Now, Google's been doing a lot of work with this, but Firefox is involved, Microsoft is involved. We've even had some of the folks from Safari pop in once in a while. So this is awesome. So within this group is where the definition of Baseline gets flushed out, making it easier to talk about Baseline and features. Anybody can get involved in this. You don't have to be part of a browser vendor or something like that. If you want to get involved in the Baseline project or the W3C WebDX community group, just go to that URL there and you can take a look and see how, you want to get involved. So what is Baseline? Baseline gives you clear information about what web features work across a core set of browsers today. Now, those core set of browsers are Safari, both iOS and Mac, Chrome, Android and desktop, Microsoft Edge desktop, and Firefox, Android and desktop. So for the most part, that covers almost all of our users, right? Like, you may have to go have special use cases for certain users if you're doing certain healthcare things and all that, but realistically, this covers the vast majority of users. So if this is what your support level is, that's kind of awesome. So if you're reading an article, choosing a library for your project, considering implementing new features, if they're part of Baseline, you can feel confident that they're going to work interoperably. And there should be fewer headaches when going to do them and fewer browser support issues. Baseline sets an expectation that this is going to work. So Baseline has 3 different stages. There's Baseline limited availability, Baseline newly available, and Baseline widely available. We'll start with limited availability. It means that a feature is not available in one or more of the browsers. Maybe it's shipped in 2 of the 4 browsers, or maybe it's shipped in all of the browsers, but it's not available on mobile, right? So if you see something is limited availability, you know, maybe I shouldn't use this. It's not available somewhere. I need to understand exactly why that's the case. So maybe it's a brand new feature, right? It just shipped in Chrome, or it just shipped in Safari. It's not available everywhere. So limited availability. Newly available means that it's now available across the core set of browsers, right? It might have just shipped. Say something just shipped in Chrome 131, but it's been available in all the other browsers for a little while. Okay, that means it's newly available. At the newly available stage, that's cool. Not everybody upgrades right away, so you want to be a little bit careful. But that's where newly available is, all right? So this is one of the other things about this that's good. You can use this for potentially progressive enhancement. And finally, there's widely available. Widely available means that it's been available in all of the browsers for at least 2.5 years or 30 months. Somebody came up with that number. There was a lot of discussion involved. But 2.5 years is sort of the estimate where, hey, at this point, we can feel confident that at this point, everybody has upgraded their browsers. They're using a browser that is at that point. So this is that more conservative line. This is a point where you can say, without a doubt, I can use this feature. This is good for me to be able to use. And in fact, you might start to see some of these logos appearing on sites like, I'll come in one sec, on sites like MDN, Can I Use? It's just up there at the very top. right? So baseline widely available, and on web.dev. Yeah, you had a question?
So about the 2.5 years, is there like a graph that shows what percentage of the population
Updates their browser? So the question was, is there a chart somewhere that shows how quickly users will adopt new browser versions? There are no official ones. If you go to some of the browser usage charts, some of them will have them. Unfortunately, I don't have one that I can share that's Google. I know for Chrome, the sort of public number that we talk about is usually 1 to 2 weeks is what it takes to get 80 to 90% of users upgraded. But there's lots of users who, for whatever reason, don't upgrade, right? They might be on an old device. They might be in a hospital or other IT setting where they're like, you may not upgrade, just sort of that very highly controlled IT environment. It may be that some cases, look, you're on, the cost of data is expensive, so upgrading is not something you're going to want to do. We're lucky in some ways. Look, think about how long, if you've got an iPhone, how long does it take you to install the latest version? You might do it that first day. If you're in this room, you're probably a little bit of techie, and you're like, oh, I want it. But then my parents will tell you right now, they don't upgrade their phones very often. And yeah, so that's where it comes from. So there are these 3 different categories of baseline. So you might ask yourself, well, which one should I be using for my project? And when should I be picking where these are? So with limited availability, you can use this under certain circumstances. If you have full control over your browsers, the browser your users are using, yeah, easy. You can use limited availability stuff, right? Think an enterprise scenario where your company comes in and they say, you will use Firefox 97, I don't know, right? If they're coming in and saying, you've got to use this, great. You know what you can do, and you know exactly what your feature set is. The second one, newly available. So newly available is great for things if you're starting a new project that won't ship for a little while. You might want to consider using some newly available stuff, because you know by the time that project ships in maybe 6 months or 12 months or whatever it is, those features are going to actually be widely available. You could also use it as progressive enhancement, right? I'll talk about one feature in a little bit where I think it's really cool, a really cool progressive enhancement. It's newly available. Hey, this is something that you can go use today. And of course, this also works if you control the browser, right? If you are in an enterprise scenario, this is awesome. One thing I will mention about this, throughout these slides, you'll notice sort of a border here and the colors. Those indicate what particular place this is. Orange, like woo, warning, caution, right? Newly available, blue. And you'll notice that the check mark just has these dots on it. The whole icon is not fully filled in, right? It's not completed yet, and it's blue. And then the last one, widely available, green. The whole thing is fully filled in, so it's sort of a visual indication about what is available. So finally, widely available. Look, you can absolutely use this. It's been around for at least 30 months. You can feel confident that this is safe for you to be using with your users. And hey, hopefully at this point, with something like this, it's well documented. There are lots of established best practices. You're good to go with this. You can also look at baseline by year, which essentially gives you a sort of view of the web platform at a specific time. So if you look at baseline 2024, that includes everything that shipped in the web platform up to 2024, right? So you might want to say, hey, we're going to support baseline 2022, which means all of the features that are supported up to 2022. We've got some tools available that you can use to say, well, what are the browsers baseline 2022 and higher, so that you can say, oh, okay, yeah, my users are all on Firefox 90 or higher, or they're all on Chrome 100 or higher. So you can go by baseline 20 by baseline year. So there's a bunch of things that came available in 2022. And I'm going to jump into a handful of these in a little bit. So I'm going to talk about some of the ones that I think are kind of cool. Baseline 2023, we saw a whole lot more stuff. And we've seen some really great stuff in 2024. So this is really one of the first times that we've been able to give developers a view of what's available in particular places. So I've talked a whole lot about baseline. Let's talk about some of the things that are now available as baseline. These are some of my favorite baseline features that have shipped in the last couple of years that I think are kind of fun. Array.flat, right? Flattens an array. It's baseline widely available. You can use it everywhere. I used to have to use underscore if you wanted to flatten an array. Like, think about some of the libraries you've had to pull in the past to make things happen where you're like, right? You don't have to do that anymore. So it takes an array, returns a new array that's been flattened. If there were arrays within the array, they're all flattened into a nice single layer. So quick, easy way to be able to flatten an array. Array@, is also widely available, and it returns an item at a given array index. So if I say, array@1, it'll give me the cherries. Now, what's the difference between this and just using the square notation stuff, right? Like, doesn't that seem like a little easier? Well, with square notation, you can't do this magic, -2, and have it come the other way, right? You could do the math, of course, right? Like, array length minus the number and minus, I always screw up the off by one thing, and I'm going to goof it up. To be able to say array@-2 and get the second last item makes me happy. Less code for me to write, less code for me to do, much more efficient, and I get an orange. So you can't do that with the square bracket notation. Find last is also a newly available feature. So this one is newly available, and it returns the last item in an array that matches a certain criteria. So for this one, I've actually gone and said, I've created a callback called over 100 that returns true if an element is over 100. So it goes backwards, right? Is 5 bigger than 100? No. 200 bigger than 100? Oh, yes, that is. So that's the one that I get back. So it'll give you that last element much more efficiently than any of the other code that you're probably going to get somewhere else. Array group by is another one. We'll move on from arrays because this is more for objects, but it's still in that data set concept. And it's pretty slick because if I take this group, right, so I've got an array with a bunch of objects, and I want to say group by the type. So I want to separate it out into all of my fruit and all of my vegetables. Array group by, you can see that bottom line, and sure enough, I get a new object back with my stuff grouped into the appropriate things. So quick, easy way to be able to manipulate data as you want to go and use this. You can also pass a callback function. So in here, I said, here's my callback. I want to look at the count. If the count is greater than 2, or I'm going to say it's okay. But if it's less than 2, maybe I'm going to add it to my grocery shopping list, right? Now, probably aren't going to use this exact kind of code in your real world application. This is kind of demo code, because demo code is much easier to put on screen. But you might have something that's a little bit more complex. You can go and say, hey, group by, and sure enough, there you go. You get add to list with the things that have 2 or less items, and you get okay for things that have more than 2 items. So much easier to be able to manipulate some of your data. And what do I need to add to my shopping list? Now, Intel Segmenter. How many people have used the Intel APIs? Yeah. So again, little things make me happy. The Intel Segmenter Intel APIs make me happy. Segmenter is kind of fun. So it'll do segmentation of different things for different locales, and it's locale aware. So if I ask you to segment this into words, I bet most people in here can do that pretty easily. Beware, right? The, Jabberwock, right? Each one of those is a word, right? They might be nonsense words from a nonsense poem, but I do like the poem because it's kind of fun. But you can easily segment it into words. Anyone want to try this one? Anybody speak Japanese in here? So if you were asked to segment this, is that a word? Or is that a word? Or is that a word? And I did have to go look this up myself. This was some stuff one of my coworkers shared with me, and I'm like, I don't know. So with Segmenter, you can say, I want it to use the Japanese locale. I want it to separate this string into words, and then calling segmenter.segment, I provide the string, and I get back the properly segmented data. As it turns out, that first, the whole sentence translates to, I am a cat, which I'm pretty sure I'm not a cat, but the first segment there is essentially I. So the pronoun for me. So there's a lot of different things that can do. The Intel APIs are pretty amazing, and I'm excited to see so many of them landing. So there's like a date-time format, which, look, I live in the States. I work with a whole bunch of my coworkers who are in Europe, and when I write a date and share it with them, they get angry, and when they share a date with me, I get angry, because I'm like, do you mean month or year, or, you know, it just gets all mixed up. To be able to have this just work makes me happy. There's things like number formatting, because we put commas between big numbers. In some locales, they put dots, right? So all of these things, if you need to format currency, does the $ go at the beginning of the number, or does it go at the end? This does that for you all automatically. You just say, hey, format this for me, thank you, and it does it. Plural rules, I have 1 of these, I have 10 of these, and applies the appropriate is, are, all of that kind of thing. It's kind of awesome. So these are now built into the browser, which makes life for us much easier, because we don't have to go get a library to do it. We don't have to go deal with all sorts of crazy fun stuff. And it's all green. So baseline widely available. You can go use these really easily. Now, if you've ever laid anything out for print, you'll know that it's a common practice to sort of have your headlines and that kind of stuff balanced, right? It looks really awkward if you've got like a long headline and then 1 word over here, right, just below it. It's just awkward. And this is one of the ones I was talking about earlier. This is a great place that you can use for progressive enhancement. Because if it makes it look more beautiful, yay. If it doesn't, look, no user is going to come yell at you and be like, this didn't work on my... They'll probably never notice. They'll notice when it looks pretty. So text wrap balance. Without it is that top image. With it is that second lower image. So it just makes sure that the font looks balanced, the headline is balanced. It's a really neat, easy one to go add, and it works across all the browsers. Thank you very much. Silly little things make me happy. And this is not a silly little thing, this is a good thing, right? So there's lots of cool stuff like this. We were just talking about this before the session started. How many of you have ever tried to center something vertically? How many hours have you wasted doing that? More than you should ever waste? Yeah, right? Like, it freaking sucks. Now, you could do it with Display Flex, right? That came out a couple of years ago, and like, hey, I changed this to a flex box and use Align Content Center and magic, and it works, but then I always had to be like, oh, how do I do this Flexbox thing? Because I was just learning Flexbox. But the thing about it is you have to put that particular element into Display Flex, which works most of the time, but sometimes it's going to break other things, and you can't do that. So Display Flex is a good solution. but I want a great solution. How about just Align Content Center? Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, that's it. It's magic. Align Content Center. You've now vertically centered whatever you want in that div or container or whatever it is. Align Content Center. How many years did it take us to get to this one thing? I've wasted weeks trying to center things across my entire career. There you go. One line. Done. So, kind of one of those ones. It's just magic. It makes me happy. Centered vertically, one line. All right, another one. If you've used CSS custom properties before, they're pretty slick, right? You can say, hey, I want to use this property. You do -- background color or something like that. But there's no type checking, there's no error checking or anything like that. But with the @property property, you can actually define custom properties with a type, a default value, and inheritance. So to define a custom property, I give it the property name, so BG color. I say syntax, and I tell it I'm using a color. So essentially, this means that it will only accept a valid color. It's type checking. If I use something else, it's going to come back and be like, meh, nope. I tell it I don't want to inherit, and I give it an initial default value. This is the color that I want it to be. So then, if I just try and use it, great, it works. I get that nice, well, I don't know if I call it nice, but you get that nice salmon color, right? Okay, change the background color here to sort of a tealy blue, and it works. Great. Exactly what you'd expect. Color 1. Not a valid color, right? Like I didn't put #111, I didn't, like 1 is not a valid color. So because it failed, and it just goes back to its default color. This means that we don't have to worry about putting the wrong stuff into things. We can just feel more confident that our code is going to work as we expect it to. And that's kind of one of those nice little things. There's a great post on web.dev by Yuna, who's on my team, who talks about this. And she's got a really good example here. There's a whole series of these posts celebrating things that have landed in baseline. So keep an eye on those. Web.dev/blog is where we put a lot of our stuff. And as things land in baseline, we like to talk about them. Because look, web.dev is a site that we run at Google, but it's all about stuff that works across all browsers. We don't post anything in there that is Chrome only. For that, we go to developer.chrome.com. So if you want to know what cool stuff works across all browsers, web.dev is our place for that. We've heard a lot of requests over time for container queries since the beginning of essentially responsive design, and it lets you test for the size of a container, not just the browser size. So you can create reusable components that you can drop anywhere in your page, and depending on the size of the space they get dropped in, they'll go to that size. As a simple example, you might have a card that when there's not a lot of room, maybe you're on mobile, maybe it's in a side panel, you want it to appear like this, right? So that it's a vertically centered kind of thing. But if there's more space, you want it to go spread out a little bit so that it appears as 2 columns. So to use container queries, the container needs to say container type, inline size, or something to that effect. So we need to identify this as our container. And in this example, I've got that wrapper there. And from there, I can say, hey, container, minimum width, and say, well, in this particular case, I'm going to show it as a grid. I'm going to show it in this slightly larger version. So this one's pretty slick, and it goes really nicely with another feature called has. So this is also newly available. You got to sort of use it a little bit with some caution. But this is probably the second most requested feature that we've heard about from folks after container queries. So what it does is it allows you to say what properties does my parent have? But it can do a lot more than that. And if you check out web.dev, there's a couple of really good articles there about it. But you can have something like this, where the component didn't include a figure. Sometimes only the text was displayed. And unfortunately on here, you can't really see this. There's actually a gray bar here. So this is one component, this is a second component. So you can imagine one where you've got an image and one where you don't have an image, okay? Well, where you don't have an image, this kind of looks tacky, right? Like this looks a little weird when there's nothing there. So to prevent this, in addition to checking how much space there is, we want to check if the card contains a figure. So if the card has a figure, we're going to do something a little bit different. So now we get that bottom one expands across the whole width of the column. So it goes to the double width. All right, so I've talked a lot about what Baseline is and what some of the cool features that Baseline have. I want to sort of wrap up with some of the ways that you can use Baseline in your development today, because Baseline really sort of came up in the last couple of years, and we've been working through a lot of the data to figure out how we make this more available. And there's a couple places where you can start to use it. So one of the ways that we're encouraging folks, and folks have been using, is use it as a way to talk to your stakeholders and say, hey, boss, I think we should set Baseline widely available as our minimum feature set. That way, anything that's there, you know you can use. The neat thing about that is that moves, right, as time goes on. So in 6 months, you don't have to go back to your boss and say, hey, boss, there's this cool feature. It's been available for a while. Can we use it? And your boss, maybe you have a pointy-haired boss, and they're just going to say no because they don't understand what the actual, if you get them to agree, hey, you can use anything that's Baseline widely available, they've already said yes. So anything that's in that particular place. And this is really good, especially, for the pointy-haired bosses who don't understand browser versions, they don't understand how stuff ships, they don't understand how that kind of thing goes on. You're good to go. So that's one way. And that would be one of the recommended things. If you take back a couple of things from this, go back and talk to your team and be like, we should make this as one of our minimum baselines. Like I said, because it keeps evolving, you don't have to go back. You don't have to ask for stuff. There's an agency, a web agency in the UK called Clear Left. Jeremy Keith is a fairly big web developer, speaks at a lot of big events and that kind of thing. That's his agency. And they've made that their company policy. So if you go to them and say, hey, we want you to build a website for us, they're going to say, yep, no problem. Here's our browser support policy. Baseline widely available. So it gives you a real easy way to be able to say, hey, this is what we're going to use, and it keeps going beyond that. Of course, you can choose to adopt non-movable baseline stuff, so you might look at your analytics and go, our audience is maybe from one of the countries where they don't update their browsers very often. Or maybe your audience is a group of people who maybe they're just stuck on old devices because they have to be stuck on old devices because that's what the IT department says. So for that, you might want to say, hey, we're going to use a baseline year. We're going to say this is what our particular version is. You can use it to see what's new. This is a thing that I tend to do a lot, looking to see what's new. There's a couple of different places that you can go to do that. Web Platform DX, github.io/Web Features Explorer is a site that was built by the Web Platform DX folks. It gets updated, I think, once a week, and it'll show you all the new stuff that's newly available, widely available, limited availability. Maybe it's just missing that one browser engine, so you can be like, ooh, we can almost use this. Now, if only so-and-so would ship that particular feature, and you can go gently kick and nudge them. All right, feel free to kick and nudge us. We are happy to hear, requests from developers when you want to hear stuff. There's also webstatus.dev. This one is built by some folks on my team. I like this one because it's very easy to go search for the stuff that I want to see what's newly available or widely available. I can also see what percentage of the test that it's passing. So I can feel a little bit more confident or less confident about, yeah, this really is going to work exactly as I expected. So that's at webstatus.dev. If you're writing documentation or blogging about features, you can add the baseline widget to your sites. You can use this internally. You can use this on like the public internet. If any of the other speakers from the conference are here, you can use these in your slides and tell people, hey, these things are good to go today. It's a real easy thing to go add. You can either install it as an NPM module, or you can just go copy the code and drop it in. The neat thing about it is it renders at runtime, so it goes to check to see what the current status of a feature is. So even if a feature was limited availability when you started talking about it, and in 6 months it's newly available, and then in 2.5 years later, it'll show as widely available. So it'll update at runtime. So it's a great thing, like 2 lines of code that you put on your page, and it'll go update that. So if you do use Baseline in any projects anywhere, you can add a PR to this page for the Baseline used in the wild. Also, all the logos that I've used here, are available for you to use on your pages and sites and that kind of thing. So if you are doing presentations, you're talking to your team, or you want to be like, hey, this is widely available, you can go use those. There are a couple of tools, not many yet. We're working on it. We want more tools. We're working with other developers of the popular tools to go add some things here. I got to say, like, my pipe dream is the wrong word, but my dream would be this time next year, I'm up here talking, and I just tell you, oh, go add this line to your linter, and it'll automatically tell you, oh, you shouldn't use that because that's not available in the particular baseline experience that you've set up. But there are a couple of places. One of them is Rum Archive, and Rum Archive is a company that does real user analytics, real user measurement. So they've got a large number of users that they're looking at. They know what browser version people are using, all that kind of stuff. So what they've gone and done is been able to say, hey, well, look, if users are, if you say baseline 2017, you're going to hit 99.97% of users. But if you want to hit baseline 2023, you're really only going to hit about 85% of users. So you had asked about the chart earlier. This is kind of that chart. The problem with this is only for sites that use Rum Archive. So not every site on the internet uses it. So it's not 100%. It's not going to give you exactly what you want. You can go look at your own analytics tools as well to get this. There's hopefully, maybe in the next couple months, we'll see another announcement from another analytics provider who's going to have some stuff like that will give you for your specific site. So you'll be able to say, oh, cool. For my site, these are what my analytics are. So with that, I'm super excited about Baseline. I think there's a ton of really neat things that will make our lives as developers a whole lot easier to be able to go, hey, yes, I can use this. I can go play with this. I know what things are available to me. I know if I need to, maybe you can't be using this today. So take advantage of these. I'm going to say thanks very much. The slides are available. All these slides are available, including most of the speaker notes. At that URL, look at the QR code. That'll take you right there. Feel free to share those with whoever. I'm very happy that these get shared. So I'll say thank you and open it up for questions, or just I'll hang out. I do have stickers here somewhere. I have stickers that say baseline, and I have stickers that say limited availability, wide availability, newly available, so you can stick those on whatever you want. So yeah, thanks everybody. Are there any questions? Or yeah.
We have another one for you. You mentioned that when something is newly available, you're kind of safe to use it if it's a progressive enhancement. Is there a way to filter all the newly available to see which ones are progressive enhancements and which ones will actually break?
Yeah. So the question is there a way to be able to easily determine what you can use as a progressive enhancement and what you should not, what is not going to be? And the answer is no, unfortunately not. You're going to have to kind of go look and say, if I don't do this, if a user comes to my site and this doesn't happen, are they going to yell at me? Is my CEO who comes to the site and looks at it and goes, this doesn't look right? If they're not going to do that, then you're good to go, right? You need to make that informed decision essentially yourself. Other questions, thoughts? Cool. All right. Well, thanks, everybody.